Thursday night, you know what that means. It is time for the UFC strategy show, UFC 252, coming up on Saturday night from the UFC Apex Heavyweight Trilogy title fight. Pete, how you feeling, bro?
What is going on? Finally, this fight is here. It's happening. I'm excited. We have a great card to talk about, and I'm interested to see where you lie on some of these fights.
Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button here on YouTube. If you're not subscribed to Awesemo here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Also, hit that notification bell. Let you know when all the programs are up on Awesemo.com. Of course, come up here later tonight. I'll have the Early Bird podcast, so be sure to check out that for tomorrow's MLB slate. But, Pete, obviously a big weekend for the UFC pay-per-view event. Obviously the biggest heavyweight title fight in UFC history. There's no question about that. And we got some big contests up on DraftKings and on FanDuel. DraftKings, they got the $1 million guaranteed contest, $200K going to first place. And over at FanDuel, they got the $252,000 contest. I believe it's $52,000 to first place in that one. So obviously everyone's going to be looking for that strategy of how to build the correct lineup for both of these cards. And, obviously we're going to break down the salaries as we go on. There are certain fights I think that are definitely DK fights. I think the main event's definitely a DK fight. I think it's a fight on DK that you have to roster. I don't think at FanDuel, because of the pricing, not as high on it. SuperDraft, I would say it's a fight that you got to roster. So what's kind of your thoughts is just before we kind of start breaking down these fights, of what you think about the salaries on all three sites?
Yeah, so the Miocic and Cormier fight is amazing. I can't wait to see it. And you basically have Miocic at 8,200 and Cormier at 8,000. Both are bargains. So I really don't think that you can go wrong either way in that matchup. It's not like you're having somebody mispriced at all. They're both. And, of course, Jason, it's the 8,200, 8,000 fight, and it's the toughest fight to call on the card. So many people are on Cormier and perhaps not giving Miocic enough credit. But, man, how will the smaller cage work out in this final fight of theirs?
Yeah, I was thinking about the main event, and I was thinking about it. It was when I was watching the first episode of Embedded, and I was like, man, I've just been so all in on Daniel Cormier in this spot, 25-foot cage, even though Daniel is a guy that's always, you look at all of his fights, he's always in his opponent's face. I mean, you think about even like the huge reach of disadvantage that he had against John Jones. He was always in John Jones's face. But, so I was like, okay, am I maybe not discrediting Stipe Miocic in a way? I mean, looking at some pictures, especially him on Embedded, Stipe looks a little leaner heading into this one.
Yeah, I think Miocic is coming in great shape. I think he needs to be in great shape because he knows that Cormier is going to bring it. It's Cormier's final fight. Cormier knows the safest route to victory is him getting back to his wrestling roots and going in there and doing what he did in the second fight in periods where he implemented his wrestling and, really controlled Stipe in that fight. Was able to not necessarily shoot a double leg on him, but shoot a single leg and then, work from there. And I think a single leg against a heavyweight makes a lot of sense. Like, I have a heavyweight fighter and we don't shoot too many double legs because guys are so powerful and you don't want to end up underneath somebody's heavy hips. So how do you work takedowns in the heavyweight division? Well, you work on their balance and basically getting them off balance on that single leg. So, single leg trips, single leg dubs, high crotches, those are takedowns that Daniel Cormier should look to utilize in this matchup. And I think that he will do that. The smaller cage will definitely press the action. Cormier is a very pressure-heavy fighter, gets in your face, likes to play hands a little bit, and then throw shots over the top. And he was lighting Stipe Miocic up in their second fight. So the large majority of each fight was won by Daniel Cormier. It's the truth. But when Stipe was able to make adjustments, you're talking about some of the best adjustments in the business, start going to the body, with DC's high guard, was able to really start working at that liver shot, which ultimately led to the end and the nice finish. So I feel like a lot of people might be discrediting Miocic here, and this isn't a spot where I'll totally avoid one of the fighters. I think that you need to, split your exposure. I'll be probably 60-40 Cormier. and I'm going to favor Cormier because of the smaller cage. But in times of the second fight, Stipe was actually the one pressing DC up against the cage. So I don't want people to think it's automatically DC's world because it's a smaller cage.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of Daniel Cormier's takedowns, he's not a guy who typically goes for a takedown for the most part in the center of the cage. A lot of them do come against the fence, so I think that's going to be an interesting thing. And yeah, you got to give a lot of credit to Stipe in the rematch where, he realized to go with that body, an in-fight adjustment that he made, where obviously that was a key factor. But when you go back to that second fight, the one thing that sticks out to you is that even in a loss, Daniel Cormier had 101 DraftKings points. It was because of landing 181 strikes. And we're typically two guys in terms of MMA DFS that stacking is something we rarely do. I do believe on DraftKings in this spot, and I would also say even on SuperDraft in a way. I don't like stacking it on FanDuel because of the pricing. But because of the 8,200 and 8,000 pricing on DraftKings, I think this is a fight that if you are a Stipe Miocic backer, or B, you believe this fight is going to hit the fourth round, I think this is a fight you have to look at stacking. And I will tell you, I do have a lineup of both these guys in the same lineup.
Yeah, for cash, you guys absolutely need to stack. These guys are perfect mid-range value. I would expect this bout to be close. I'm not predicting a finish in this fight, Jason. I think that they're both going to come well prepared. I think it's going to be a back and forth affair with somebody edging out a decision. So I will be stacking in GPP as well. Not 100% obviously, but I'll definitely have my lineups where I have both individuals. The significant strike output for DC is awesome. The power advantage should be on Miocic's side, I think, with the fight ending ability. Also, the cardio edge for me, I think Miocic can really push past and dig deep. This fight is a total gut check and who wants it more. I think for legacy, you're going to look at Cormier rise to the occasion, but I don't think Miocic is going to give it up easy. So back and forth affair. I can't wait to see it.
By the way, the last time Daniel Cormier went to a decision in a title fight, October 3rd, 2015, against Alexander Gustafsson. Of course, that was a title defense there at 205 pounds. Also should note, prior to his Francis Ngannou title defense, Stipe Miocic had won 4 straight fights via first round knockout, something I think to pay attention in terms of that. Ty did ask about, is the main event a must-have at the FanDuel pricing? I say no.
Yeah, I would say it's hard for me to not roster one of these guys, though, Jason.
Yeah, totally.
For me, just to be safe, I'll always have, my share of a 5-round fight. But stacking wise, obviously DraftKings, I don't see how stacking on FanDuel would work out. That would leave you with relatively minimal salary. But
let me ask you this combination.
Yep.
Would you rather have, let's say, Stipe Miocic and Sean O'Malley, or Sean O'Malley and Jairzinho Rozenstruik? It's an interesting one, huh?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough because, it's possibly one of the best main events I've seen in a while. So it's literally a coin flip fight.
We'll get into this later. I love Herbert Burns in this spot.
Yeah.
I feel very confident of Herbert Burns getting a win. I feel fairly confident about Sean O'Malley getting the win. So I think it just comes down to it. And Ty, I think you have to look at it just how does it fit in your roster construction? I mean, look, I think that whoever wins the main event, it will be a very good score on all platforms. So I think you have to look at that. But I think also you got to think about do you think Sean O'Malley is going to win the first round? Do you think Herbert Burns is going to win the first round? If you think the answer to that question is yes, I think that's something you have to look at when you're putting your lineups together. In that scenario, if you're a single lineup type player, but look, if you're a multi-lineup player like we are, you're going to have shares all over the place.
Yeah, I think the safe bet is to include the main event and move on.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think a key thing is tomorrow's weigh-ins. Yeah. What does Daniel Cormier weigh in at? I know on Monday he mentioned that he believes he's going to weigh 240 to 242. If that's his weight, I really like that weight. If he's 250 and above, I do have some concerns the longer the fight goes.
Yeah, I always pay attention to the weigh-ins, and sometimes my picks will alter because of them. Some people come in looking drained, or some people you can really tell had a rough weight cut. I will be paying close attention to this, so make sure you guys join us on Saturday for Live Before Lock for our updated rankings and information.
Yeah, definitely something you want to check out there. Also, looking at our ownership projections as we currently state here on Thursday evening, we got Daniel Cormier on DraftKings, the second highest owned fighter at 45%.
Yep.
Stipe Miocic 40%, and I don't like the fact that they have Herbert Burns at 54%. I would like to. I'm maybe hoping that number comes down a little bit because he's like the guy that I look at when people are looking at Sean O'Malley. They're looking at some of the higher options that maybe Herbert Burns would slide a little bit, but I'm guessing that's not going to happen.
He could be lost in the shuffle. You never know, especially how weigh-ins could alter people's decision making. Mid-range usually gets lost, and there's a couple guys that we'll get to.
Yeah, we got Jandiroba at 41%. Oof. Oof.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's a fight, and we'll get into that later. I think if I have any shares in that fight, it's probably going to be on the other side. I just don't like the price point on that one. Of course, when we're talking about those projections, great way for you to get those projections by picking up a MMA weekly pass over at Awesemo.com, as you get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for the upcoming MMA DFS slate with an Awesemo Plus MMA weekly pass for $8.95. That includes full access to all of Awesemo's leading fighter projections, ownership projections, and the top fighters tool. There's never been a better time for MMA DFS, so step in the octagon today. And speaking of projections, a free projection that is up right now over on the Instagram account and Facebook, that will be for Sean O'Malley, as we will provide free Awesemo Plus player projections for NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and more on our Instagram page, which is at Awesemo_com, and our Facebook page daily. So make sure to give them a follow. As I mentioned, this week's MMA free fighter projection is Sean O'Malley. And speaking of Sean O'Malley, he's in the co-main event. I like how they put Sean O'Malley in this spot. I think it shows the UFC knowing they have a star in Sean O'Malley taking on Marlon Vera. When you think of Marlon Vera, sometimes he can be a slow starter. When you think of Sean O'Malley, precision, accuracy, and I think when you go back to the Eddie Wineland fight, how he set up that fight ending sequence with his feints.
Yeah, so Sean O'Malley has some of the best feints and fakes in the business. Little subtle movements to get a reaction out of his opponent, and then he capitalizes on an opening. You saw that where Eddie Wineland reached to parry the uppercut, and then he followed that feint up with a right cross. It was absolutely picture perfect. It was beautiful. Sean O'Malley has so many tools in the toolbox, whereas Marlon Vera is a very basic fighter, but a very tough one. And this is a very tough test for Sean O'Malley. Definitely his hardest fight yet, but I think it's at a proper time, Jason. He's either going to blow through Marlon Vera, or it's going to be a learning experience, and he's only going to grow and get better because of this fight. You think of Marlon Vera, slow starter, like you mentioned, takes a ton of shots, ton of damage, but keeps on going. He's really, really tough and durable, and ultimately finds a way to win inside the octagon. So he can face a lot of adversity, and usually he can overcome it. The question is, how raw is Sean O'Malley? Is Sean O'Malley still raw enough where he can get exposed via grappling? I'm going to say no, because I know Sean O'Malley has been doing some grappling tournaments. A submission winner, we're talking Origami, actually had a grappling match against Hector Lombard. Crazy enough, that's insane to me because they're not even in the same weight class. But the guy's been in the offseason since he suffered the big bad ankle break from the Andre Sukumtop fight, has really been developing his game so he can be a complete mixed martial artist. So I know that he's dedicated to his craft, and literally he eats, sleeps, and breathes mixed martial arts, and I love that about him. Marlon Vera is starting to come into his own at 27. I mean, when you think about Marlon Vera, I don't know why, Jason. I just assumed he was like mid-30s. I feel like this guy's been around for a while, and he's taking a ton of damage in his fights, but has also delivered some incredible stoppages as well. You have Sean O'Malley, 75% finish rate, Marlon Vera, 87% finish rate. I am super excited in this bout. I think Sean O'Malley at 9,200 it's a warranted price tag based on his previous performances, but does he do the unthinkable and finish Marlon Vera? Marlon Vera has not been finished. I don't know, Jason. I don't know, but I think O'Malley gets it done.
Yeah, Sean O'Malley has won back-to-back fights via first round a knockout. Vera, he's coming off that loss against Song Yudong, a very close decision loss. People would definitely argue that Marlon potentially won that fight prior to that. He
Yep.
had won 5 in a row, and someone had mentioned it in the YouTube chat about whether O'Malley and Miocic are a little overpriced on FanDuel. So Sean O'Malley's at $21, Stipe Miocic is at 20, and I think we can kind of incorporate DraftKings into this for Sean O'Malley at 9,200. Do you feel that for him to cash in on that price on both sites, that he's got to get the first round victory, and more to that point of, are you willing to pay that price if you think he wins by decision?
Yeah, so I don't know if Sean O'Malley needs to get a first round finish over Marlon Vera, because I think a finish over Marlon Vera is going to be hard to come by. I think O'Malley has enough volume to justify the salary at 9,200. We're not talking about a guy that's near 10K like Chimaev, and what happens if he doesn't get the early finish. He throws 6.86 strikes per minute, and if you look over Marlon Vera has a negative ratio of throwing 3 strikes a minute and absorbing 4. So he definitely takes a ton of damage. So maybe Sean O'Malley's able to light him up like a Christmas tree here and to get a decision win. If he gets a finish over Marlon Vera, there's no doubt about it, no question. This kid is the real deal. He's really going to be tested in here, Jason. I'll have plenty of shares of O'Malley at 9,200. You're talking about a great spot, but Marlon Vera could easily pull the upset here at 7K if O'Malley's more hype than actual talent. We know the talent's there, but maybe he's just not ready for something like this. So 7K option, he's definitely a GPP play, but it's O'Malley for me.
Ricardo says, if O'Malley doesn't win by knockout, I don't see him scoring over 90 to 100 points.
I would say that's fair. That's guessing he doesn't land any takedowns, which why would he want to take down Marlon Vera? But things can get tricky in there, Jason, and sometimes you just go on instinct. That's also not taking into account any knockdowns he could potentially have, any reversals, any advances. So I think 90 is a safe score for O'Malley. I just don't know if he will be one of the highest scores on the slate.
So there's 6 fighters on this card that are 7.5K and under on DraftKings. And I truly believe that, obviously, when you're looking at that under 8K range, I'm looking for 2 or 3 fighters, when I'm trying to build that lineup. If I'm ranking them 1 through 6, Vera is my number 5.
Yeah, I would agree. He's at the back end of my punt play rankings, but I think he's in the consideration because of what we've seen from him. And it's not like he's some beaten down veteran who's 35 years old, 40 years old. He's 27, and I really can't wrap my head around that. I just don't think he's ever faced somebody with the speed, timing, accuracy, hands, legs, knees, spinning techniques, and explosiveness that Sean O'Malley brings to the table.
And I mentioned earlier, Vera does tend to be a slow starter, and so, but I do got to think that Team Oyama team and Chito Vera here, I do believe they have to be thinking, let's get this fight into the second round. Let's get this fight into the third round. Let's see what Sean O'Malley is like. Obviously, because this is a step up in competition for Sean O'Malley. If Sean wins on Saturday night, I think you're going to see him in a pretty notable fight.
Yeah, 100%. I think he'll be a main event going forward if he wins this fight. Somebody mentioned, and you mentioned earlier, that maybe Miocic and O'Malley are priced up too much on FanDuel, and I would say that they're fairly priced. And the reason being is their opponents are most likely going to look to take them to the mat. Mm-hmm. So the FanDuel scoring is a little inflated based on defendant takedowns and defendants, like all the defensive grappling scenarios. That could really rack up O'Malley and Miocic's score over on FanDuel, so that's something to consider.
Yeah, looking at so ownership we've got on DraftKings, we've got Sean O'Malley at 41%. Over on FanDuel, we have him 41% and 11% as the MVP. Obviously, because as you were kind of talking, I was thinking about if you're a multiple lineup player, I got to be thinking, part of your roster construction is going to be to not maybe put Sean O'Malley in a lineup, thinking that his ownership may be high because, like when we're looking at the big contest on DK and FanDuel, how are we becoming contrarian? How can we come up with that unique lineup? And, if O'Malley doesn't get the knockout in the first round, is he optimal?
It's tough to say because you don't know how the fight's going to go. I would imagine if he doesn't get the knockout or the finish within the first 2 rounds, he's most likely not optimal. But on FanDuel favors strikers, and he's in a perfect spot over there at $21. I mean, you have to pay up for him, but I think it's for good reason.
Ricardo says if he wins by knockout, I think O'Malley is fire of the year, no question. No. Right now, my fire of the year is Gilbert Burns.
He's up there though. O'Malley, if he goes out there and does this, I mean, we still have a long time before the end of the year.
If he would get a top 5 win towards the end of the year, okay, then he's going to consider it. But right now, it's Gilbert Burns.
Okay, okay. That's a different conversation. But yes, he beat up a washed Tyron Woodley, but he did look incredible.
2 incredible performances. I mean,
yeah.
Ricardo says, I would want to pivot to Marab at 8,700 on DK or 18 on FanDuel. And then Dave says, he goes,
mass multi-entry.
Yeah, he's saying you should have at least 1 or 2 lines without O'Malley. Gabe says O'Malley ain't fought nobody. I don't disagree with that. It's a natural progression. Look, I think that he wins on Saturday. He's going to get another top 5 fighter there. Then we got the heavyweight matchup when we get down here. We got Junior Dos Santos and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Of course, last time we saw Rozenstruik did not go well for him, getting knocked out in 20 seconds. JDS has lost back-to-back fights, both via TKO/KO against Curtis Blades and Francis Ngannou. Rozenstruik, 8 of his 11 pro fights have ended in the first round. For JDS, 5 of his 7 losses have come by TKO and KO. I think this is a fight that, in terms of DFS, you got to look at it. Good chance we could get a knockout on either side of it. I think the question is do you see value in JDS here?
I think JDS will be a very common punt play at 7,800. And, I can understand it to a point because he's a former champion, was on such a roll before ultimately suffering the defeat against Cain Velasquez and a very bad defeat from Cain Velasquez. Since that point, we have seen JDS somewhat exposed, and his defensive problems have really started to shine through, especially of late, and has suffered a lot of TKO and KO losses in his career. This is a very, very pivotal fight for DFS. And Rozenstruik is coming off of a very recent knockout loss to Francis Ngannou. We called that one. We knew that was going to happen. But, I think that Rozenstruik is more limited as far as striking and overall MMA game. But I still think that he's so dangerous and can take advantage of Junior Dos Santos's mistakes. I know that people will be searching for Dos Santos and hoping that he goes for takedowns and everything. He averages 0.3 takedowns per 15 minutes. So unless he goes out there and really, really just tries to go for the takedown, I don't really see that being an avenue for him. Obviously, if he gets into the mat, he should have an advantage there. I mean, he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. If you look at his social media, he has been looking like he's in incredible shape. I am wondering how much that'll translate into the fight. But for me, it's Rozenstruik at 8,400. I think he catches JDS on the chin at some point in some exchange. And I just think at 8,400, you're getting a nice bargain here against a guy who suffered multiple KO losses.
Lee says you got to have this fight. I agree. I think you got to have this fight on all 3 platforms.
Yeah, I think it's so reasonably priced. Avoiding this, talking about heavyweight fight, both guys coming off of knockout losses. The one thing I could I see, I can't even think about it. I was going to say that they come out a little gun shy and not, not wanting to get caught, but you are in the smaller cage, which is going to force the action. So I don't foresee that happening. I think JDS will carry some heavy ownership as a $7,800 punt. I'll have some exposure to him, but for me, as far as picks wise, it's Rozenstruik at 8,400.
Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button here on YouTube. It's a great way to show your support for myself and Pete and all the great people here have at Awesemo.com. Moving on, we got Herbert Burns and Daniel Pineda. Daniel Pineda back in the UFC. Of course, he had those his last two fights, a fight on the same night at PFL 8. Were initially wins for him, but were overturned after the fact because he failed his drug test for elevated TE ratio, testosterone to epi testosterone. So he is unbeaten in his last 6 fights, 4-0. Second stint in the UFC. His first stint, he was 3-4. His last fight in the UFC was back in 2014. Of course, Herbert Burns, the Burns brothers, have been kind of the story of the UFC here in 2020. Both of his UFC wins have come by knockout in the first round against Nate Landwehr and Evan Dunham. He's won 5 in a row, all by stoppage, and the last 4 have come in the opening round. There's so much to like here with Herbert Burns. He's going to be a staple in a majority of my lineups.
Yeah, so Herbert Burns is your boy. Sanford MMA, Hard Knocks 365, whatever gym it is of the week with
Sanford
Henry
MMA.
Hooft.
That is the bought and paid for name, brother.
Okay, well, whatever it is, Henry Hooft's team is on a roll, and they were looking really great down in Florida. Greg Jones Wrestling, really good overall team. The Burns brothers are on fire. Burns has some of the best jiu-jitsu in the lower weight classes, and I think that you're starting to really see that. The Evan Dunham performance was so beautiful. It was against a washed veteran that I thought had a chance in that fight in some moments. But Burns against Pineda. Pineda has a 100% finish rate, Jason. So Pineda has 26 victories with a 100% finish rate. That is insane. You don't really see that. Obviously, it's not against high-level competition. But
I was going to point that out. If you look at his record,
yeah,
is Leonard Garcia his best win?
Probably close. Yeah, it's probably close. But you could say the same thing for Herbert Burns. Herbert Burns really hasn't fought too many tough opponents yet. So he has 13 fights going up against a guy that basically has 40 fights. So 40 fights is 40 fights. I don't care who you're fighting. And that's a ton of experience. Pineda generally wins his fights via submission. He's not going to submit Herbert Burns here. That's not going to happen. But what that submission ability can lead to is a better submission defense than you would actually think. Pineda has been subbed several times in his career. He does have 13 losses. So Burns, if anybody, can submit Pineda. But it's not like Pineda's some scrub on the mat. I think that Burns is in a very nice spot. 8,900 could be, lost in the shuffle here. Average 104.5 DraftKings points. Not the best striking ratios yet, but he does have good Muay Thai. 2.5 strikes output to 3.6 strikes absorbed. But for me, like you said, I like Burns here a lot, quite a bit at 8,900.
By the way, the over 1.5 rounds in this is plus 120, under 1.5 rounds minus 140. Burns to win by submission is minus 125. Burns by TKO KO plus 650. Pineda is going to pull off the upset here. He is plus 420 to win by TKO KO. Pineda to win by submission plus 1750. But like as Pete said, I think that's pretty unlikely.
What's Burns via decision?
Burns via decision is,
because I actually think that's probably what's going to happen.
Plus 579.
I would play that line. I like that line. Burns has great takedowns, averaging 4 per 15 minutes, 100% takedown accuracy, 100% takedown defense. His submission attempts per 15 minutes is almost 7, which is, insane. Obviously, it's a limited sample size. He had 2 quick finishes, so the numbers are a little skewed, but the potential for Burns at 8,900 is huge.
Yeah, I like Burns on FanDuel as well.
Yeah.
SuperDraft one times, not as big on that one, but definitely love him on DraftKings and on FanDuel. I mentioned about their 6 fighters under 7.5K and under on DraftKings. Pineda would be who I'd rank number 6.
I'd agree with that. I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility that he comes through with the W, but I think it's pretty unlikely. Maybe his 40 fights show through and he's able to avoid some bad situations, wind up on top because Birds will be hunting submissions and getting a little too comfortable off of his back, potentially losing a decision. But I just don't see it.
Then we got John Dodson taking on Merab Dvalishvili. Obviously, Merab, the favorite in this one. Another step up in competition. And before we started tonight's show, I was listening to the Anik Florian podcast, and Ray Longo was on, and he's on that podcast every week. And, of course, we all know he's the coach of Merab. And one of the things I found the most interesting, he talked about this is going to be the biggest challenge of Merab's career. But the one thing that stuck out to me, he must have said it 3 or 4 times, is you can't, you can't reach for something that's not there. Overextend yourself. He says that's where John Dodson has shown the ability to turn fights around when they're not going his way.
Yeah, so whenever you're facing a talented counter striker, and I would classify Dodson as that, if you overextend or you overcommit on any strike, you're going to pay the price, especially with somebody who's very, very elusive, quick on his feet, has great footwork, has a big left hand. This is Merab's toughest challenge yet. It really is. I think this is a very tricky matchup. And you guys know that I love Merab and his takedown potential and bringing people to takedown city. But I think you're going to see him have to overcome some adversity here and struggle with getting close to Dodson. I know it's a smaller cage, but when I tell you that Dodson, I trained out in New Mexico. I watched him train plenty of times. He's one of the most explosive young lighter weight class guys out there. He can get back to his feet really well, has decent takedown defense, but it's his explosiveness, his elusiveness, and his speed that really gets him the W's. I would not underestimate Dodson. Dodson, as far as a GPP pick at 7,500, he's one of my favorites, actually, to pull the upset and crack Merab Dvalishvili. I'll have to tell you, and I know it's tough to compare fighters, but if you look back at last week's Chris Weidman, ultimately got the job done. He really struggled defensively striking, and you can kind of see some struggles of Dvalishvili defensively as well when it's standing up. And I think a guy with so much experience and John Dodson, who has fought everybody, 10-6 in the UFC, fought Demetrius Johnson twice. I think you could see somebody as skilled as Dodson pick him apart on the feet. It could be a closer fight than most people are expecting.
Yeah, when you look at John Dodson in terms of takedown defense, so he was taken down 1 time by Nathaniel Wood, 2 times by Peter Yan, 1 time by Pedro Munoz, 1 time by Marlon Moraes, 4 times in his second fight against Demetrius Johnson, 5 times in his first fight against DJ. So obviously that's going to be the key. I feel like, Pete, we need to come up with a Takedown City shirt for the show.
I would love it. I think it'd be great. Let's talk about Dodson, right? I want people to really understand and respect who John Dodson is. He is the spoiler of all spoilers. On The Ultimate Fighter, he went in there and spoiled TJ Dillashaw. TJ Dillashaw looked like, he looked incredible, and obviously went on to become the champion and was dominating everybody. He knocked out TJ Dillashaw. And you could say that's an early stoppage, but he clipped him and hurt him and dropped him, got the victory over him. Same thing in the Nathaniel Wood. You're looking at a prospect, and they throw a prospect up against the tough John Dodson, and I'm really high on Nathaniel Wood, and he goes out there and upsets that prospect. So this is kind of what John Dodson does, and he thrives in these moments. I think Dvalishvili is a very safe play, like for score-wise, because if he does win, his takedown potential is through the roof, and he is priced fairly at 8,700. So for me, he's a cash play. But Dodson is definitely – I'll have my shares of John Dodson at 7,500. He's in my pool for long shots.
Yeah, Lee had mentioned about how Marab was, the key, the MVP on FanDuel for his last fight. 13 takedowns. Obviously, that's going to be the key of being able to take a fight to the ground. Notice the over 2.5 rounds. Any prediction what you think the over 2.5 rounds is?
Minus 300.
Close, minus 335. Of course, because we should note that Marab has won 4 in a row, all of those via decision. Of course, John Dodson, he's been up and down, 4-4 in his last 8 fights. He is coming off that win against Nathaniel Wood, a TKO win for him. So definitely something to pay attention to there. Then we got Jim Miller versus Vince Pichel. Jim Miller, 3-1 in his last 4 fights. His last 3 wins, all have come by first round stoppage. It's the first fight for Vince Pichel in 1 year, coming off that decision win against Roosevelt Roberts. Of course, both these fighters coming off wins against Roosevelt Roberts, and Vince Pichel is 5-1 in his last 6. Look, I think if you're a Jim Miller backer here, it's a GPP fight all the way. Because if he's going to win, it's going to come in the first round. I'm more on the Vince Pichel side of things. I think that he'll be able to keep the fight on the feet, make this a stand-up fight. Now I think the only question is can he score enough decision-wise to put yourself in a good position to be optimal?
I think Jim Miller needs to take the fight to the mat, and that's where he will really excel and have an advantage over Vince Pichel. The problem with that is Jim Miller usually only shoots 1.6 takedowns per fit, or lands 1.6 takedowns per 15 minutes, which is not the best numbers. He's okay with going to his back, but I think standing up at this point in his career could be detrimental. And against a guy who hits really, really hard on Vince Pichel, I think Pichel at 7,900 in consideration for my long shot pool. I think that I like him more than Jim Miller in this spot because I just see Jim Miller as a submission only type of guy winning in this spot. Whereas Vince Pichel, I can see defending takedowns and punishing Jim Miller on the feet, either getting a TKO or a decision win here. The problem would be, obviously, if Vince Pichel was taken down and submitted like how Gregor Gillespie did.
Yeah, Ricardo says, he goes, I love Pichel, but I feel his strength is going to be his takedowns, and that plays right into Jim Miller's BJJ strength.
Yeah, I would imagine that Vince Pichel is just going to eliminate takedowns from his game plan this fight because it's a great point, Ricardo. If he does go to the takedown well because you're just in the fight and you're doing what you're used to and what you're good at, you could end up how Roosevelt Roberts was, armbarred off of his back. I think that Vince Pichel doesn't have the best takedown defense as far as numbers wise, but that could largely be due to that horrible fight against Rustam Kabalov a while back where he's taken down, I think, like 12 times or something crazy. He has a 22% takedown defense, which is absolutely horrible. But I think the numbers are a little skewed. Jim Miller talked about in an interview how the older he gets, he did notice that his cardio just isn't the same. And he needs to get on the right track early and get the ball rolling early in the fight. And I think that's what you always mention about Jim Miller is that's why the round 1 prop on him is so interesting all the time because he needs to go out there and establish dominance and get the fight in his favor early on so that he can have that momentum to carry him throughout the rest of the fight. But for me, I like Vince Pichel at 7,900. I think the value is pretty nice.
Yeah, that prop Jim Miller to win in the first round plus 475. By the way, the over 2.5 rounds minus 140, under 2.5 rounds is plus 120. Then we got a female matchup. The return of Felice Herrig. Of course, she's been gone since the end of 2018. Coming back from knee surgery, she takes on the former Invicta strawweight champion Vera Jandiroba. Jandiroba, a big betting favorite in this one. You got to pay up for her, whether we're talking about on DraftKings and or FanDuel. But I guess I should mention the over 2.5 rounds prop bet. Minus 245.
I thought it'd be a lot more than that. So I think that they're starting.
I would be surprised if that by the time we get to fight night, that's not a minus 330-ish.
Yeah, I was going to say, because if it starts going the other way, I think a lot of money will be coming on Jandiroba by submission. We did see Felice Herrig get armbarred by Reina Marcos early on, but outside of that, it's been pretty durable. 5-3 in the UFC, coming off of massive reconstruction surgery to her knee. How does she respond, especially the layoff? And how does her leg hold up in this bout? You don't know. It's a lot to overcome for Felice Herrig, but Felice Herrig is a staple and really has faced a lot of tough competitors within that division. But you can also think back of when she was somewhat dominated by Paige Van Zandt, and I do think that Jandiroba is a lot better than her. And I feel like Jandiroba is starting to come into her own a little bit. Did drop a fight to Carla Esparza in her debut. Talk about a tough debut. But she did take down Carla Esparza 3 times. So let's think about that. Carla Esparza is really, really good at taking people down and has great wrestling. And Jandiroba was able to land 3 takedowns. She landed 3 in a previous fight against Mallory Martin. So as strong as Felice Herrig is, I actually don't mind Jandiroba at 9,000. The one issue would be, does she get a finish? Does have an 80% finish rate, but typically in female MMA, it tends to go to the decision more than not.
Glad you bring up Carla Esparza. Who's one of Felice Herrig's best friends?
Yeah.
So I'm sure there has been plenty of conversations between the two of them about what Carla's game plan was in that. Of course, you mentioned about Felice Herrig, that armbar loss she had on the Ultimate Fighter. Technically, that does not count towards her official record. So all of her losses on her official pro record have come by decision. She's had 22 pro fights, Pete. 17 have gone the distance.
Yeah, that's a lot. So initially, I saw the salaries and I was like, oh, Felice Herrig, 70, whatever she is, 7,200. I was like, oh, okay, I can get behind that a little bit. Then I start looking and diving deeper, and I'm like, man, think about some of her losses. Paige Van Zandt, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Michelle Waterson. I'll give her the pass on that because Michelle is very talented. But Karolina Kowalkiewicz didn't really amount to much in the UFC. And if you look at her UFC record, she hasn't really fought the best competition. Let's go down the list. Michelle Waterson, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Courtney Casey, Justine Kish, Alexa Grasso, Kaylin Curran, Paige Van Zandt, Lisa Ellis. So I think the champ and Jandiroba could definitely be prepared and ready for this spot. Just needs to be sharp for one moment, scramble behind, and submit Felice Herrig. And I think that the layoff will show. Jandiroba doesn't look the best on film. I'll tell you that. She really doesn't. But I definitely can see her being a part of my player pool, and I don't mind her.
The year plus layoff is very concerning to me. Coming back from surgery, knee surgery, how does she look? By the way, looking at the prop bets on Felice Herrig by TKO KO plus 14-15.
Yeah, it should be that high, Jason. That's insane.
Herrig by submission plus 2,100.
Yeah, plus 5,000 is what it should be. That's not happening. But I mean,
Herrig by decision plus 350.
Yeah, so that's a little bit more logical. If you're going to play Herrig at all, you play that Herrig decision line. That is so disrespectful. That plus 350. That's insane. That's for a girl. I
understand that. I wouldn't chase the money. I would just play it to take the plus 260. Just in case she somehow does get the stoppage.
So her straight up is plus 260? Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Because when you think you know how a fight's going to go, anything can happen. And the worst thing that could happen is you be on the wrong result of the fight, but you pick that fighter.
Ricardo, man, I appreciate all the comments you've left here tonight. He said that the 2-year layoff is concerning for Herrig. So, I mean, it's about a year and a half, 18 months, something like that. He goes, but Jandiroba doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence in this fight.
Yeah, and I think it's because she hasn't really been able to show too much of her skills in the UFC. How does she stack up with some of the elite in the division? I would not say that Herrig is anywhere near that, but Herrig at one time was highly regarded and was basically placed in the Ultimate Fighter in hopes of her winning the whole show, and it didn't happen. In my opinion, that's why she was on the show, because she was a big name at the time. But it didn't happen. And I do like Jandiroba, despite maybe this is a nice little spot where you can gain some leverage on the field where people are seeing the same thing on Jandiroba. They're saying, man, the tape doesn't look good, and I don't really want to back her at 9K. Maybe you can get her at a decent ownership percentage.
Of course, Pete, football season is here, and we here at Awesemo are excited to bring you our inaugural season-long fantasy football and best ball draft kit using the same tools that have helped make Alex Awesemo Baker the #1 daily fantasy sports player. We've compiled a package that will revolutionize the way you prepare for fantasy football drafts. For only $29.95, our draft kit includes everything you need to prep, including rankings, projections, sleeper tools, loads of content from our experts, and the Draft Wingman, which will update team projections in real time based on who you've already drafted. And as an added bonus, new members of the FFPC, your home for pay-for-play season-long fantasy football leagues and contests, get a $35 credit when you sign up for an Awesemo draft kit, which basically makes it free. Don't miss this one. Dominate your fantasy and best ball leagues today. Next up, we got a matchup, TJ Brown and Danny Chavez. Of course, last time we saw TJ Brown, that submission loss to Jordan Griffin back in February. He's only gone to decision twice in his career, has 13 stoppage wins, 6 stoppage wins by losses. Chavez has gone to the distance 9 of his 13 pro fights. However, he has won 3 in a row, all by first round TKO KO, coming off a win on July 18th here in the Tampa Bay area against Dylan Kala. And should note, prior to these 3 wins, he had not won a fight by stoppage.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Jason, because I think if you do a quick glance at his record, you'll see, knockout, knockout, knockout. But you need to look back and see the consistent decision machine that he somewhat is. Only has a 30% finish rate. You mentioned that. Brown comes in at a 93% finish rate with 14 wins, but does have 7 defeats. And when he loses, he does get finished. So this is a fight that I will have plenty of shares. I think that Chavez isn't a horrible long shot at 7,400 because he does have knockout potential, does throw good low kicks, does have crisp boxing. But in his past, the reason he's lost fights is because of his takedown deficiencies of getting taken down and not being able to get back to his feet. I know that he's worked hard on his takedown defense to try to improve that area. But TJ Brown actually fought a couple of people that I'm pretty familiar with in the New England scene. And they have really good takedown defense and really good ground game. And TJ Brown was taking them down quite a bit and with some unorthodox techniques as well. So it's not like he's just shooting double legs on him. It's almost like he somewhat does an Imanari roll where, jiu-jitsu practitioners roll for leg locks. But he did so and came out the back door and kind of got it like a double leg, but it was almost a fireman's. It's a very unorthodox technique, but he did it. It was very nice. TJ Brown at 8,800, not a lock by any means based on how he is when he loses. But this could be the takedown city guy that you're looking to be a part of your lineup, whereas people are going to go towards Merab, who's in a very tough matchup. Brown's in a tough matchup, but is going against a guy that has really struggled to defend takedowns.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about there. Someone's FaceTiming me, so I had to hit the old, no, can't talk to you. This could be a fight that may be the fight that either side will be optimal because the ownership is probably going to be. We've got TJ Brown at 28% and Chavez at 21%. This may be the fight in terms of when you're looking at who needs to be a part of your lineup to come in those big contests. This may be a fight that has to be in your lineup.
Yeah, it was tough to find the most footage on Chavez, but I know TJ Brown pretty well, and like footage-wise, I watch a lot of his tape, and I like what I see. The guy has good striking, good takedowns. The unknown factor for Chavez could work in his favor a little bit, whereas Brown wasn't able to study him so much because of the lack of film. That's always a slight advantage to the guy that's coming in with the unknown factor. I will have some 7,400 Chavez. I like him a lot more than, let's say, Felice Herrig at 7,200.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that finishing ability. I'm with you on there. Then we got Ashley Yoder against Liviana Souza. When I talked to Ashley Yoder, my biggest takeaway from the conversation was she talked about how she's mentally in a better place heading this matchup than she's been previously. She didn't really go into much details. I kind of take that as something away from fighting was just kind of constantly on her mind here. Obviously, she is a fighter who has now gone to decision in her last 6 fights. All of her pro losses have come by decision. All of her stoppage wins are by submission. This will be Souza's first fight since that loss against Van Buren. 3 of her last 4 fights have gone the distance, but 8 of her 13 wins via stoppage. Both of Souza's pro defeats are via decision. This is one of these fights where I kind of wonder the fact of, the size of Yoder. Could that create a problem for Liviana Souza in this one? And I do know the over under 2.5 rounds is pretty high on this one. It is minus 350.
Oof. Yeah, so you have Lavinia Souza coming in 13-2, Ashley Yoder coming in 7-5. Souza's 2-1 in the UFC. Yoder is 2-4 in the UFC. Decent pricing on both of them. I would say that Yoder's not one of my favorite plays at all, because even if she does win, she probably doesn't score the best. She tends to look for takedowns in her fights when fights are close. She took Randa Marcos down twice. Didn't take Mackenzie Dern down because obviously why would you want to do that? Mackenzie Dern took her down, and even Angela Hill landed a takedown against Ashley Yoder. So that's something to note going up against Lavinia Souza, who is accomplished judo-wise, Brazilian jiu-jitsu-wise, took Sarah Froda down 4 times. Even Brianna Van Buren, who has excellent wrestling, took her down twice. I think Souza's the A side in this fight, obviously at 8,600.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that she's going to be a little too skilled for the tough Ashley Yoder. It'll probably go to the decision, most likely. But give me Souza. She has a better finishing rate of 77%. I don't see that happening. But at least she hunts for submissions, averaging a 1.9 submission attempts per 15 minutes. Her striking is a little troubling, though. If you look at the ratio, 1.79 strikes landed and absorbs 3.45. That's quite a bit. So hopefully she's not behind on the scorecard standing up, because maybe Yoder could pull off a sneaky decision win here.
Be sure to hit that like button. Let's try to get those likes over 50 before we get out of here in about 7 minutes or so. The first 2 fights of the fight card, to me, feel like more like Contender Series fights.
Yeah.
That maybe this was something the UFC was targeting for Contender Series, but because they're trying to fill out the fight card, of course, we lost a fight earlier this week of Ankalaev and Kutalaba, which is a fight that I thought was going to be a really fun fight to watch.
Yep.
It probably wasn't going to last long, but we got Chris Daukaus and Parker Porter heavyweights. Chris Daukaus, of course, his brother already in the UFC, comes out of that Philadelphia fight scene. Of course, Parker Porter up there in the Northeast where you're at. I know his management has been trying to get him in the UFC for a couple of months now. So, this is one where, in terms of Chris Daukaus, 6-1 in his last 7, 5 of his 6 wins via stoppage, all in the first or second round. Porter's won back-to-back fights via stoppage, and he's 4-1 in his last 5.
Yeah, Parker Porter at 8,500 and Daukaus at 7,700. This is a heavyweight matchup, and it's a Contender Series fight, exactly what you said. And what happens in Contender Series fights, Jason? Tons of finishes, guys bring it, and whenever you see a UFC card and you see newcomers, typically those are fights to target because it's more action, and the nerves play a lot into that. So mistakes happen and early finishes happen. And I think that this is a very interesting spot. You're talking about a heavyweight fight, 2 guys that like to throw hands. How can you not target this fight? I think one way or another, somebody's getting knocked out or submitted or finished. And as far as Porter has fought a lot of guys, comes in with 89% finish rate, from the likes of Gabriel Gonzaga to some other guys on the regional scene. Daukaus coming from Philly. The competition in Philly is a little bit stronger than New England, and comes from a great promotion in CFFC. Porter's coming from CES. I think if Daukaus takes Porter down, it could be a quick night for him. I'll obviously be rooting for Parker Porter because he's a nice guy and I like his fighting style, and I'll be rooting for any guys from New England. but I have to lean Daukaus here at 7,700. He's going to be the bigger guy, 3-inch height advantage, 2-inch reach advantage. Pay attention to the weigh-ins, and maybe we'll get to see what kind of shape these guys are coming in. But my lean is Daukaus, and I'll have plenty of shares. He's one of my long shot plays that I actually feel fairly confident in. Like Dodson pulling off this miraculous, this miraculous upset win over Dvalishvili, or a heavyweight fight of Daukaus at 7,700. I think it's an easy pick. Give me Daukaus at 7,700.
Opening fight is Kai Kamaka taking on Tony Kelley. Some people may remember Tony Kelley from the MTV show called Caged, which Matt Schnell is a part of. I think obviously the concern you have with Tony Kelley, the lack of activity, last fight 14 months ago. Previous to that, 2016, Kamaka has won 5 in a row, including a win 2 weeks ago in LFA against Michael Stack. I'm familiar with Michael Stack. Kamaka's gone decision in 6 straight fights. Kamaka is a pretty sizable favorite here in terms of the DFS lines. Tony Kelley, because of his fighting style, how much he goes for it, I think he is a great punt play at 7,300. And he's a guy, if he wins, I think he scores really well.
Yeah, Tony Kelley's a guy I'm circling, and at 7,300, I was waiting for these salaries to come out. And when Josh hit us up and told us about the salaries, I was like, ooh, really? Okay. Kelley at 7,300, you're talking about a guy who fought Kevin Aguilar in a 5-round bout. And I thought he won. It was very, very close. And Kevin Aguilar has had a ton of success in the UFC and has looked really, really good doing so. And Kelley, even though he's 5-1, could go severely overlooked based on just his record alone. Watch that fight. See how skilled he is on the feet. Has some great footwork. Kind of like Dominic Cruz, not really, but moves his head, throws good combinations, does have some good takedowns as well. But that's ultimately how Kevin Aguilar was able to beat him. It was through the takedown route. Kamaka, strong guy, does have some good striking and some decent takedowns, but I think that the movement of Kelley and his, like you mentioned, his finishing ability of 80% is huge in this matchup. Kamaka only has a 14% finish rate, and he's 7-2. That's pretty terrible. Give me Kelley. I like him for the upset. 7,300. He's a guy, long shot play that I'm going to be targeting.
We'll get a couple questions in here, and we'll give our picks before we get out of here. Cameron says, of Dvalishvili, O'Malley, and Burns, who are you most comfortable with skipping on? And of those 3, would you take the trio or 2 and 1 from the main event? First off, I don't know how you put all 3 of those in a lineup together.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because when you rattle that off, I'm like, okay, how's that possible? What are you thinking?
In terms of who am I most comfortable in skipping on? Oof. Man, it's Dvalishvili or O'Malley. I'd probably say Dvalishvili just because I think O'Malley's got a good chance to get in the stoppage in the first round. But if O'Malley goes decision, Dvalishvili, I'd rather have Dvalishvili.
But yeah, obviously. I would have to agree. I think that I'm going to be a little underweight on Dvalishvili, and hopefully that doesn't hurt me because he does have a very safe floor usually if you can get a hold of guys. But Dodson literally is like the Tasmanian devil running around the ring and so much movement, and you take him down and he springs back up. So it's a tough matchup. I'll probably be a little underweight on that one.
3 cash guys FanDuel coming from Ty.
Cash guys, FanDuel. I think you got to look at Daukaus or Porter. I like Daukaus. I will say that Rozenstruik at 17 is interesting. And give me Burns at 19. I like that.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. There as well. So yeah, favorite MVP picks for FanDuel. Mine would be Burns.
Burns is a safe one. I think Burns is a safe one. Think about strikes, early finish. The Porter or Daukaus fight is one that could be a sneaky MVP. So maybe Daukaus based on takedown potential as well?
In terms of picks, I'll go down my picks here. Give me DC, Sean O'Malley, Rozenstruik, Burns, Dvalishvili, Pichel, Jandiroba, Brown, Souza, Daukaus, Kelley. By the way, these are our straight up picks. This is not including DFS salaries.
Yeah, absolutely. Miocic, O'Malley, Rozenstruik, Burns. Dvalishvili, I'll do it. Pichel, Jandiroba, Brown, Souza, Daukaus, and Kelley.
You know how you struggle with Dodson, Dvalishvili?
Yeah.
I almost said Felice Herrig.
Really? Yeah, I mean, the
layoff concerns me.
Yeah, me too. Not everybody's Dominic Cruz and can come back off of that.
Of course, we'll be back on Saturday for Live Before Lock. I believe we're going to be on at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If that changes, obviously we'll be putting it out on our social media channels, Awesemo social media channels as well. Of course, he is at Pete the Heat MMA. I am at Jason_Floyd. Let's go wrap it up for the UFC 2 DFS Strategy Show right here on Awesemo.com.